Okay, last time we had a really great conversation about burning out your system with Kundalini and the eighth sphere and that whole thing. It's really, we really got into it. So, last time we continued our study of the Kundalini and its impact as registered during the first 4 initiations. Quote, the 3 first initiations see these results, he's talking about the blending of the fires, perfected and lead to the 4th initiation, where the intensity of the united fires results in the complete burning away of all barriers. So we have, quick review, we have the latent fires of matter and the radiatory fires of matter, which blend at a center between the low between the shoulder blades, and then triangle of fire is then created with the mental fire, the fires of mind, right? And that draws down spiritual fire and shows as a flame above the head of the disciple. So maybe that sparks some memory. So we then consider DK's emphatic warning on the dangers of premature tampering with the Kundalini fires, which we're told can lead to the complete destruction of the physical permanent atom, which would then keep you from being able to incarnate, and it also has the effect of breaking your connection with the soul aspect. So it's very dire possibilities here. We then took up 2 of the cited HPB quotes. This one from Isis Unveiled, which details what happens when the indwelling jiva, quote, finally loses sight of its divine mission. We then just barely began the last chapter of this division on prana and the etheric body, called Death and the Etheric Body. So let's start by rereading the first passage under this title, and then we'll get into it. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, and Veronica. Want to read?
Hello, I'm Veronica.
Sometimes she's not there. So we move down the list.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool.
Sorry.
No problem.
It is not our purpose to give facts for verification by science, or even to point the way to the next step onward for scientific investigators. That we may do so is but incidental and purely secondary. What we seek mainly is to give indications of the development and correspondence of the threefold whole that makes the solar system what it is, the vehicle through which a great cosmic entity, the solar logos, manifests active intelligence with a purpose in view of demonstrating perfectly the love side of his nature. Back of this design lies a yet more esoteric and ulterior purpose, hid in the will consciousness of the Supreme Being, which perforce will be later demonstrated when the present objective is attained.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, here where he says he's talking about scientists coming up to speed with, their awareness of the existence of an etheric body, and he says that DK, he himself, could point the way to the next step if that was his purpose. But clearly it's not. It's an interesting hint there that he could actually outline how to discover the etheric body, but that's not his purpose in the writing of this treatise. So next up, what we seek mainly is to give indications of the development and correspondence of the threefold whole. So he's taken the big picture here. Again, he stepped back because this is the introduction to a new section. The big whole that makes the solar system what it is, the vehicle through which a great cosmic entity, the solar logos, manifests active intelligence with the purpose in view of demonstrating perfectly the love side of his nature. So the threefold whole is, of course, spirit, soul, and form, which function as a unit in order to demonstrate love by means of active intelligence, the latter being the vehicle of the former, active intelligence being the means by which love is demonstrated in this threefold solar system. So the focus is on the love principle during this solar incarnation. The all caps entity is the solar logos as the central spiritual sun on the cosmic Buddhic plane, not the sun in our solar system, who uses our solar system for his threefold vehicle of expression. Okay. Next, back of this design lies a yet more esoteric and ulterior purpose, hid in the will consciousness of the Supreme Being, which perforce will be later demonstrated when the present objective is attained. So if it all goes according to plan, it will be in the next solar system that this more quote unquote esoteric purpose, hid in the will consciousness, which we're told is completely unknown, even to the masters of wisdom of this system. So all of that will be revealed in the next solar system. And by the way, anytime you have a question or comment, you can just raise your hand and we'll take it right up. Okay, let's see here. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Fred, can you read? Are you there?
Yeah, the dual alternation of objective, something black on my screen. Could somebody read the next two lines and then I can read it? Dual alteration of objective manifestation. And my screen is blocking the next couple of words.
Oh, okay, let me read the first part. The dual alternation of objective manifestation and of subjective obscuration, the periodic outbreathing followed by the inbreathing of all that has been carried forward. Can you read from there?
All that has been carried forward through evolution embodies in the system one of the basic cosmic vibrations and the keynote of the cosmic entity whose body we are. The heartbeats of the logos, if it might be so inadequately expressed, are the source of all cyclic evolution, and hence the importance attached to that aspect of development called the heart or love aspect, and the interest that is awakened by the study of rhythm. This is true not only cosmically and macroscopically, but likewise is the study of the human unit underlying all the physical sense attached to rhythm, vibration, cycles, and heartbeat lie their subjective analogies: love, feeling, emotion, desire, harmony, synthesis, and order, and
Ordered sequence. And back of these analogies lies the source of all, the identity of that Supreme Being who thus expresses himself. Okay, So first up, the dual alternation of objective manifestation and subjective obscuration, the periodic outbreathing followed by the inbreathing of all that has been carried forward through evolution, embodies in the system one of the basic cosmic vibrations and the keynote of that cosmic entity, all in caps, whose body we are. Okay, so a cycle of solar manifestation, which is one solar incarnation, also called a Mahamanvantara, or 100 years of Brahma, is here characterized as an outbreath, whereas the period of subjective obscuration, also called pralaya, that's that period of the unmanifest, is characterized by a solar logoic in-breath. So we're here told that this dual alternation, which can be illustrated by a simple sine wave, embodies one of the basic cosmic vibrations. Vibration manifests as color and sound. Thus, a particular note is sounded by means of this dual alternation. One note in a vast chord in what is called the music of the spheres. So let's take a look at two passages on the out and in breath. Could we get a reader, please?
Eka, you want to read?
Okay. In emancipation comes the breaking of the chains. In liberation comes the abolition of the old forms. In the domination of matter is seen the liberation of spirit. So in the sounding of the sacred word, it in its sevenfold sense comes the escaping from the shattered forms. First in the outbreathing, the attraction of matter, then in the inbreathing, the gradual shattering of the material forms and the leaving of them behind. On the path of,
Continue, please. Thank you.
Okay. On the path of the outbreathing, whether human, planetary, or logoic, these building devas on the same ray as the unit desiring manifestation or on a complementary ray are attracted by his will and desire and perform their office of construction. On the path of inbreathing, whether human, planetary, or logoic, they are no longer attracted and the form begins to dissipate. They withdraw their interest and the forces, likewise entities, who are the agents of destructions, carry on their necessary work of breaking up the form.
Thank you. So just, imagine or visualize this continuous out-breath and in-breath, and that it, with the out-breath, all these, innumerable Davic beings are drawn into activity just through the out-breath of the solar logos on all the schemes and, throughout the solar system, and busily doing the work of creating the forms and the dense physical forms of all manifestation, right? And then at the end of the out-breath, then the in-breath comes and all of that link is broken and all dissolves and is drawn back up into spirit. And this is just two breaths of the solar logos. It's really an extraordinary thing. Okay, next up, the heartbeats of the logos, if it might be so inadequately expressed, are the source of all cyclic evolution, and hence the importance attached to that aspect of development called the heart or love aspect, and the interest that is awakened by the study of rhythm. So DK has switched metaphors on us from out and in breath to the logoic heartbeat. There's a dual metaphor in this heartbeat idea. First of all, they mark the incremental progression of the solar logoic life. And second, in this system, It is through the logoic heart centers that the second or soul aspect is developed. But there is something more here. DK tells us that heartbeats are the source of all cyclic evolution. This brings to mind Shiva's tapping of the drum in order to initiate the great illusion of sequential time. So over here we have it demonstrated as a heartbeat. So for the solar logos, we might say that the heartbeat is a second ray expression of the will to be, whereas breathing associated with the throat is a third principal function and has more specifically to do with the outer manifestation. All right, but both principles working in accord to make manifest the will to be of the solar logos. DK describes what he means by rhythm in his next sentence. This is true, not only cosmically and macrocosmically, but likewise in the study of the human unit. Underlying all the physical sense attached to rhythm, vibration, cycles, and heartbeat lie their subjective analogies: love, feeling, emotion, desire, harmony, synthesis, and ordered sequence. And back of these analogies lies the source of all, the identity of the Supreme Being who thus expresses himself. This is quite a statement. So rhythm, this is one of those words that DK uses in a very particular way, a unique way, really, compared to how it's used in our languages, our various languages, right? So here it's an attribute of the fourth ray, and he indicates that this rhythm can be gradually elevated and thus lead from emotional desire to love and from harmony to synthesis, which is he actually equates the idea of harmony with rhythm. You're closer to his use of the word rhythm when you think of the term harmony. In this latter expression, rhythm is synonymous with equilibrium, which releases one from control of the pairs of opposites. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Yeah, just before that, Tia had a question and comment.
Yeah, Tia.
If you could go back to the previous slide before that. Yes, in this one, the second sentence, you refer to the sounding of the sacred word in its sevenfold sense. Is that referring to the planes, or what is that specifically referring to?
Well, this is a deep, yes, it does refer to the planes, but not only to the planes.
Right. Could you expound on that a bit? Because that was particularly intriguing to me, because that has deep, deep ramifications.
Yeah. Well, the word also applies to each of our principles,
Yes.
which are found on those planes. And DK, it's interesting because I'm actually going to be giving my main conference presentation on this very subject. So he describes how the sacred word in its sevenfold sense actually demonstrates in detail through the AUM, and each of those letters represents one part of the process, and it's only the second one, the U, which is the Vishnu aspect, that is sevenfold, and has to do also with the seven sacred planets and their activity in sustaining creation through the use of and through the sounding of their particular word. And you know that that's going to be related to their ray type, as well. And then the other two letters have to do with other aspects. The one of the letters, I think it's the A, though he doesn't tell us. He sounds when it's time to pull it all back up and destroy the outer forms again and pull spirit back into unity, right? So it's a deep subject that is peppered all through the blue books, but that's just an introduction to what he means.
Yeah, because it's very when I read it, the thing that comes up is the ray and the plane connection.
Yeah, and the principles.
Yeah.
Yeah. For instance, you have Atma Buddhi Manas is going to definitely have specific words associated with them. Like he says at one point, the fivefold word activates a greater deva of the monastic plane, and that deva holds the word into a manifested sphere of activity, right? And that's conditioned by manas. So that's just the kind of detail, that he gets into about this outbreathing. So thanks, Tia. Okay. All right. Did we read this?
I think this is the one.
That's where we are, I think.
Yeah.
Can we get a reader, please?
Janet, you want to read?
I'll try to. I'm having trouble focusing. When the point of rhythm or balance is reached in the solar system, in a plane, in a ray, in a causal body, and in the physical body, then the occupier of the form is loosened from prison. He can withdraw to his originating source and is liberated from the sheath, which has hitherto acted as a prison. And he can escape from an environment which he has utilized for the gaining of experience and as a battleground between the pairs of opposites. The sheath of the form, or whatever kind, then automatically disintegrates.
Thank you. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please? And you all see how this turns the idea of death on its head, right? That, each individual death in incarnation is a liberation from the constraints, the severe constraints of manifesting in a triple form, right? And that you are free from those constraints. And that's such a desired result that all the first four initiations are oriented towards making it a permanent condition, that you finally die to the form world altogether and you shatter the causal body, right? So it really takes a reversal of our thinking, but it can be very useful and in terms of preparing for our own inevitable deaths. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Kira, do you want to read?
Therefore, the study of pralaya, or the withdrawal of the life form out of the etheric vehicle, will be the same whether one studies the withdrawal of the human etheric double, the withdrawal of the planetary etheric double, or the withdrawal of the etheric double of the solar system. The effect is the same, and the consequence is similar. What is the result of this withdrawal or rather, what causes that something which we call death or pralaya? As we are strictly pursuing the textbook style in this treatise, we will continue our methods of tabulation. The withdrawal of the etheric double of a man, a planet, and a system is brought about by the following causes. A, the cessation of desire. This should be the result of all evolutionary process. True death under the law is brought about by the attainment of the objective and hence by the cessation of aspiration. This, as the perfected cycle draws to its close, will be true of the individual human being, of the heavenly man, and of the Logos himself.
Thank you. Okay, first, therefore, the study of pralaya, or the withdrawal of the life from out of the etheric vehicle, will be the same whether one studies the withdrawal of the human etheric double, the withdrawal of the planetary etheric double, or the withdrawal of the etheric double of the solar system. The effect is the same and the consequences similar. So, what Deke here describes as the withdrawal of the life from out of the etheric double through an achievement of rhythm, he describes earlier in TCF as the shattering of the etheric web in order to effect liberation. It's the same idea. In both cases, the purpose is to allow for a more adequate form to be built for the next cycle. This next paragraph poses the question, what is the result of this withdrawal? Or rather, what causes that something which we call death or pralaya? And this leads to a three-part answer. First, the cessation of desire. This should be the result of all evolutionary process. True death under the law is brought about by the attainment of the objective and hence by the cessation of aspiration. This, as the perfected cycle draws to its close, will be true of the individual human being, the heavenly man, and of the Logos himself. So key here is the phrase, the attainment of the objective. That's what lies at the heart, no matter at what level you're at, suggesting that the form we inhabit is best suited to some particular objective towards which we are driven through aspiration. This was set by the soul when we incarnated. There was a particular objective the soul had in mind in order to take the next, to realize the next objective, right? So the life purpose is based on that objective. And once that is achieved, then the form, then the energy is withdrawn from the form. You know, this makes sense of a lot of deaths that you otherwise might be very much dismayed by. You know, one that comes to mind offhand is General Patton, you know, who himself, even though he wasn't an esotericist, he said that he had incarnated many times as a general, and you know was actually present in a war in the Mediterranean, you know, at the time of Christ, right? And so what happened to him? Well, just days after the war ended, he was in a Jeep crash and was killed, you know. And so he had, you know, he had obtained his objective. You know, we might look at somebody like John Lennon in the same way, you know, where it's this tragic, seemingly early death, but you know, from the point of view of the soul, possibly he had obtained the objective for that lifetime. It's an interesting thing. It's interesting to think in terms of those terms when we look at people's deaths, you know. Okay, so so thus form and objective are aligned. You know, the purpose of the form and the objective are aligned, and when the objective is achieved, desire fades. The form has served its purpose and can be discarded. So the desire for life itself fades because it was totally animated by the objective for being in incarnation. Any thoughts or questions on this?
Yeah,
Okay.
Tom.
Yeah, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just this description reminds me what I read just from somewhere, that in future when we are a little bit more evolved, perhaps in the 6th root race, so people will do just this, that they will incarnate, they will then have their objectives for that incarnation, and when they have done it, they will die, and then they will move on. So that would be the future goal for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds brutal, but once you understand that the reunion with the soul is really the life aspect, that's the desired end, and that we come here to achieve certain results, then, that difficult aspect about death starts to fade out. And if that's, what you're suggesting is a closer alignment between the form aspect and the purpose, so that the form is in direct alignment with the purpose. And when that purpose is achieved, then everybody recognizes the fact that it's time to pass on, right? So, yeah, very interesting. Thanks, Tom. I see Robert's hand. Yeah, Robert.
In terms of this paragraph, letter A, I think it's also possible to read this death as the death of an objective. So it's not necessarily just tied to a lifetime. It could be actually a series of lifetimes, which is when he refers to the perfected cycle. Death of the form or the body or whatever could just be one piece of like a process.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. It could take several lifetimes to achieve a specific objective. But there also, that is broken into specific parts of that objective. And when those are achieved, then the life is withdrawn. It brings up a lot of questions, because there isn't, as Tom brought out, there's not a hard linking between the two. Therefore, you have, people, for instance, in old age homes that are obviously doing nothing and are their life purpose has really been fulfilled and it's finished, but the form persists. DK at one point actually warns against keeping the form too fit. That's something you don't hear much because you can actually defeat the mechanism which withdraws the life from the form, temporarily only, of course, and it's just wasted time.
Yeah, you're basically strengthening the physical elemental.
Yeah, that's what you're doing.
Is a problem because you're going to have to fight the thing to get free of it later on. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, of course, that's no excuse to not go exercise, guys. This is in extreme cases kind of thing. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, Victor.
Yes, Victor.
Oh, sorry.
Victor, are you there?
Yeah, go ahead, unmute again, Victor. There you go.
Okay. This is primarily a question, but from what I've understood, we have an individual purpose, and then we have a group purpose.
Right.
If one achieves the individual purpose, then there is still possibly a group purpose to achieve while we are in incarnation?
That's a fantastic point. It brings up a lot of subsidiary ideas. First of all, we incarnate as groups even before you're allied or aligned with a group in service as disciples. We are nonetheless tied to the group in which we incarnate with, and that itself has a purpose, a demonstrable purpose, and our individual purposes are part of that greater purpose. So it may be a group purpose that we're mistaken for our individual purpose. Like for instance, shifting the energy from the solar plexus to the heart, which is one of those huge purposes that takes, that's the process of unfolding the second initiation, right? Well, the group you came in with there may be an alignment around that purpose. We may not even know that because we have yet to establish group consciousness within ourselves, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And then, of course, later, individual purpose fades in the light of group purpose. And at that point, then you have incarnations like Alice Bailey and HPB, where the individual purpose has already been foregone. When Alice Bailey agreed to do the work of being an amanuensis for DK, in a sense, she gave up whatever individual purposes, service orientation, and she was doing a lot of service work before he contacted her, etc., and gave herself over to this ashramic purpose, essentially. So that's a really good point, and thanks for that, Victor. Okay.
There's one comment, pertaining to the General Patton comment from Leslie. She says, we know that General Patton's grandson was active with Torquem Sardarian's group and was an avid, devoted student of the Ageless Wisdom.
I didn't know that. That's amazing. How about that? Yeah. Well, he dismayed his generals and colonels by regaling them with stories of his own past lives. I mean, here's this super conservative, purpose, who once slapped a soldier for not doing his duty in battle, for not, it basically didn't recognize PTS, and so this is not an enlightened, an overtly enlightened person, but he had this continuous consciousness around this one thing, which is pretty amazing, really. Anyone else?
Yeah, Magda.
Yes, Magda.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, there's a lot of static in the background, but
Can you hear? Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm asking, isn't it an acquired fact, universally acquired fact, that what we call high entities are those individualities that have conquered, realized, have been initiated over a certain degree, over a second, third initiation? Isn't it an acquired fact that, so as you were saying about PHB and Baylis and Rudolf Steiner, Rayad, once they have attained realization, then they do not follow the cyclical path or incarnational path, which is a schematical pattern that we've been studying about reincarnations of human beings that have not obtained that. So isn't it an acquired fact? The individualities like Paul, Thomas, Jesus, and all the masters, they've been following all this cycle. So I'm wondering if I'm wondering about something valid or not.
Well, that there's two parts to that. Go ahead and turn your mic off if you have it. Gail, can you turn it off? Yeah, thank you. You have
Yes.
a lot of static for some reason in the background. Okay, so there's two parts to that. First of all, at the fourth initiation, when you shatter the causal vehicle, you are in all respects liberated from the necessity of reincarnation. But there are those that choose to come back and take on one form or another of a Mayavic vehicle in order to serve. Now, until that fourth initiation, it's still the quality of the incarnations are vastly changed as a result of taking initiations. So a third initiate who incarnates has so much control of his own vehicles already because he's done all this work in order to establish that control that it really doesn't resemble an average person's incarnation at all, even though he's still actually taking bodies in the three vehicles. It's with the specific purpose of preparing for that fourth initiation, right? Less so for the second initiation, but still a second initiate would be someone that is very much directed in their purpose. And they would consciously take that initiation in order to complete that purpose, Whereas an average human being, of course, is just lost in Maya and is gathering experience in order to eventually establish some control. So it's not just one or the other, you have these graded levels of experience in terms of one's incarnation until it's finally broken. I hope that helped answer your question somewhat.
Yes, I guess the answer is universally accepted that this is how it works. After renunciation, so after fourth degree initiation, then if one's decided to take up three vehicles, that is what happens. And so the answer is yes, it's a sure fact, so to say, following your studies.
Yeah, we read about, all the masters that were in Shigatse at the time of the writing of AAB.
Yeah.
I doubt they're there now. Well, these are masters of wisdom. They've taken the fourth initiation in previous lifetimes. So their choice to incarnate was very conscious. They chose time and place and their association with those other masters as part of their particular path of service, and that has really nothing to do with the cycles that people who are bound to incarnate have to undergo. It looks the same on the outer level, but if you have any inner vision at all, if you contact such a one, you can see, their immersion in the light, and that they're actually free. Nonetheless, there is a jailhouse experience to being incarnate. I know when Neem Karoli Baba sort of announced the day before he was going to die, he said, I'm going to be out of jail. I'm going to be free. And there was nothing physically wrong with him. It was just that whoever his contacts are on the inner side gave him the word that his time in jail was finished, and he was announcing it gleefully to all his disciples. So there's still, I think it's quite a sacrifice and quite onerous for ones of that level of attainment to actually be in incarnation, you know. Anyone else?
Okay, so there are two patterns of, so that belongs to the beings that are already highly, the blessed ones, so to say, and the other ways for mortal beings, if you pass me that. And can that be linked to the notorious Sacred Grail, you know, how do you call it? The sacred cup. The Templars are looking for it, has been looking for it for 2,000 years.
Right.
So
Well, yeah,
can you
it's
draw a connection between the lineage, the saint or sacred lineage of Christ, of course, after he asked Joseph of Arimathea to collect the blood under the cross, and he gave it to preserve and serve to him to bring over to Europe. And then from then on, with Cathars and Templars and you know, all that lineage, and Michael's lineage, or I don't know how you call it, but it's the same thing from Eastern to West. So can we draw a link between these two
well,
things?
sure. You know, one of the links is that it's imbued with the waters of life. It's the blood from the second principle, which is the Christ aspect, right? So, you know, when you're seeking the Grail, what you're actually seeking is the vehicle of Christ consciousness, right? And that, well, that's your own soul. The Grail really is your own soul, because that's the embodiment of the second principle in your particular constitution, you know. And all Christ meditation is oriented towards that realization, you know. And that's why the church picked it up, and you know, with the idea of communion, that you commune with the Christ principle through this metaphor of the blood of the second principle, or the Christ principle, you know.
Yes, so as it's for the vehicle of consciousness, so in a spiritual way, for the principle of as high as below, it's also on the earthly way, meaning the spiritual way, it's what we all human beings are, we have to follow, as in the same fractalic way as the highly ones, you know, and they're highly blood and Haley blood.
Right.
It's following that same the same fractal purpose. So my question is, this Sacred Grail, of course, they didn't do wars and genocides and you know, all that Cavalier, Parsifal, you know, all that Sega. And so in a earthly, bloody and way and flesh way is the same thing. They were preserving a symbol of consciousness development, and they were also preserving and custodying the blood, the lineage, so the disciples and the relatives, meaning the Marys, and which we kind of know, you know, that's not a name every woman had, you know, it's the mare, the mother, the sea, the waters, and so it's also, they were defending the lineage, which is made of people, incarnated people. So like Jesus and Mary Magdalene and Joseph and the Giovannis, the Artus, you know, all that. You know, they say the secret word is the Giovannis plural. You know, Giovannis is a word, of course, the profane word. The other is unknown, but it's the lineage. The Giovannis are the last children, the last born children of a family, is what they called it back then. Giovanni is my child, my early, how do you say, the last brother that I have. Okay, so Jesus was referring to Giovanni was his brother, because Lazarus was the same entity of Giovanni. It's the same person, not entities. So Giovanni's, Lazarus, and Mary, the two Marys, arrived to La Mer, Le Saint-Marie de la Mer in France, in Provence, and then there is the famous place up in the mountain where you know the story for maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a person and it's a symbol. It's all the same thing. So
Yeah, that's right. And there's
the externalization of hierarchy, that was the last point I wanted to get to.
yeah, and that was an example of that. I hadn't thought of it this way before, but you're right that when Jesus, overshadowed by Christ, incarnated, it was an externalization of the hierarchy, at that time. And this whole idea of divine lineage, which is fascinating. I've done some reading on this too, though it's been quite a while, a Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And there's a few books that are just really interesting, but don't lose sight of the fact that the true lineage is on the inner side, that it's the physical plane is never causal. It can reflect causality or demonstrate causality, but it doesn't determine causality. So, for instance, if the bad guys kill the last descendant, that doesn't end anything. That it's that you never have a causal action happen in terms of affecting divinity. You never have that happen on the physical plane. So the divine lineage is completely intact, and those who control such things will determine how that is, the next stage of how that issues forth.
Thank you. So it's like that the person, it's body and flesh, but it's also the symbol. So you're right that the Templars were not defending just an actual body lineage, but they were defending that and the Christ consciousness that came with it. So the possibility for incarnated beings to follow that path, the same path. So they were defending the symbol and the flesh, same thing. So now we are facing the same events of 2000 years ago, same pattern, same scheme, same events, which Rudolf Steiner prophetized on materialism, and Ahrimans would, take just, incarnations and Ahriman and all that. So now that the Templars, we are like the Templars here.
Yeah,
So
but the difference is that's all of that was one of the great mystery expressions of the Piscean times, and it's, it's wonderful stuff. But this turning of the cycle now moves it into group work and into Aquarian energy, and it will look different just for that reason. It will take it out of the sense of the individual savior and in the individual incarnation. Christ has said that he will that the consciousness of Christ will actually be carried by many people in his ashram during his coming incarnation, and for that reason, it will be a very Aquarian type of event. We're going to need to move on from this one particular topic, but thank you for your interest in interesting ideas, really interesting ideas. Yes, I see a couple of more hands.
Tia.
I was just to piggyback on what you said, also the onset of the Aquarian Age is going to move us also from the sort of emotional, heart-centered perception more into a mental, balancing, practical aspect of, that seventh ray, which will make all of this conversation look very different, even in terms of the vehicles and how they're being utilized from an incarnational perspective, because now we're going to have a lot more higher development access to the higher mind.
Yeah, the heart will still be very much a part of it because it's the
Right.
second principle, but it will be a heart-mind combination, which is illumined, intelligent love, as opposed to the bleeding, the sacrificial heart, which is that sixth ray devotional aspect, which really characterized the major religions of this period, of this age. So yeah, that will be a fundamental shift. Anyone else?
That's all.
Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please? This is the second point concerning withdrawal of the etheric double of a man, a planet, or a system, right?
Kirsten, do you want to read?
Are you there, Kirsten?
Sorry, yeah, I have muted myself twice. By the slowing down and gradual cessation of the cyclic rhythm, the adequate vibration is achieved and the work accomplished. When the vibration or note is perfectly felt or sounded, it causes, at the point of synthesis with other vibrations, the utter shattering of the forms. Motion is characterized, as we know, by three qualities. 1, inertia. 2, mobility. 3, rhythm. These three are experienced in just the above sequence and presuppose a period of slow activity succeeded by one of extreme movement. This middle period produces incidentally, as the true note and rate is sought, cycles of chaos, of experiment, of experience, and of comprehension.
Thank you. Okay, so first, by the slowing down and gradual cessation of the cyclic rhythm, the adequate vibration is achieved and the work accomplished. Here, DK introduces a relation between rhythm and vibration, suggesting that the slowing down of the cyclic rhythm, and the key word there is the slowing, made possible by controlling that rhythm, then withdrawing desire leads to soul alignment, which is the quality of vibration. This is followed by a state of rhythm or equilibrium, which leads to death and reunion with the soul. Thus, an adequate vibration here means adequate for the transition into death. Okay. Next, when the vibration or note is perfectly felt or sounded, it causes, at the point of synthesis with other vibrations, the utter shattering of the forms. So there's a synthesis with other vibrations, right? Which would have to come from beyond the world of form. And it is this vibrational synthesis that shatters the etheric web. These other vibrations might be a tone or sound sended forth by the soul. Next, motion is characterized, as we know, by three qualities: inertia, mobility, and rhythm. These three are experienced in just the above sequence and presuppose a period of slow activity succeeded by one of extreme movement. So this first paragraph is focused on rhythm, which is the third of these three qualities, right? In this segment, DK describes the two phases that lead up to that final rhythmic stage. So Inertia is the period of slow activity and is related to the early stages of incarnation. The following stage, mobility, is a period of rapid movement wherein all the physical, astral, and mental faculties are developed. And rhythm, as we've just learned, is related to the death process. This triple quality relates to the gunas, right? Inertia to tamas, mobility to rajas, and rhythm to sattva. Keep in mind here that DK is not just talking about a single death experience, but also that process which takes, tens of thousands of lifetimes, resulting in the permanent liberation from samsara, and thus the need to incarnate. In this context, we see that emotional and mental inertia precedes the, quote, extreme movement, called by DK mobility, needed to develop our astral and mental bodies. We have to be active. We have to go through this mobile stage in order to develop our astral natures and our lower minds, right? This is after we come out of that initial stage of physicality. Then through aspiration and discipleship, entrance into the influence of rhythm or the sattvic phase is developed before final liberation at the fourth initiation, right? So you can see how this applies to every single life and to the whole career of all your lifetimes leading up to the fourth initiation, right? The baby is born into inertia, gradually becomes mobile. I mean, this is literally true, right? It develops, through recapitulation, all the three sheaths, and then at near death, this rhythm is achieved. The purpose of life has been accomplished, whatever little purpose was there for that life, and sattva takes over and at the time of death. And the whole thing also applies to the entire career of all lives, right? Okay, next. This middle period, it's talking about the rajas, produces, incidentally, as the true note and rate is sought, cycles of chaos. So it's talking about this period, rajas, mobility, cycles of chaos, of experiment, of experience, and comprehension, and of comprehension. So rajas, or that period of mobility, covers the greatest part of one's incarnated lives, which are spent largely in the halls of ignorance, gathering experience, and only towards the end of this phase, in the halls of learning, when the aspirant/disciple begins to comprehend the impact of their thoughts, their words, and their actions, and begins to take responsibility for them, does that other quality of sattva start to enter in. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, before that, Tom had something.
Yeah, Tom. You're muted. Tom, are you there? Okay, we'll have to come back.
Yeah, I think he's opening his mic, but not hearing him. If you restart, or yeah, I think that's what he did. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I have wrong mic connection. Yeah, I was just saying that this is so wonderful, deep and practical also, because this can be applied not just those big rhythmical events called life, but also within the life. I have done many projects, and this is like a description of any project. That first, very slow, you know, you have to do something, and then you go wild experiment, nobody knows, but everybody moves around, and when finally the project is dealt with, you then things settle down, they become rhythmic, and then it will just die down and you to start a new project. And also in different stages of life, you can apply these same pattern. So it's really, really deep. Thank you.
Yeah. And you know, if you know this in advance, you know, for instance, in your project-oriented life, you can design the project to include these. Instead of fighting these stages, you can adapt your project to include them. You know, don't expect a lot of mobility during the very first part of it, right? And construct ways that will lead to that mobility, and then construct ways out of mobility that will lead to that place of equilibrium where the result is accomplished. You know, it's people.
Yes, and welcome chaos, because it's part of the process.
It's part of the process. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Tom. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Maria Michaelis. I am here. Following. On these 2 degrees of motion, which are characteristics of the atom man, of the heavenly man or group, and of the logos or the totality, comes a period of rhythm and of stabilization wherein the point of balance is achieved. By the force of balancing the pairs of opposites and thus producing equilibrium, pralaya is the inevitable sequence. C. By the severing of the physical from the subtler body on the inner planes through the shattering of the web. This has a threefold effect. First, the life that had animated the physical form, both dense and etheric, and which had its starting point in the permanent atom, and from thence pervading the moving and the unmoving, in God, the heavenly man, and the human being, as well as in the atom of matter, is withdrawn entirely within the atom upon the plane of abstraction.
Thank you, Maria.
Am I reading? Oh, okay, yeah, I got the end.
Yeah, you got to the end.
I'm just reading from my book, so I was.
Oh, yeah, I see. Good. Okay. Okay, so first up, following on these 2 degrees of motion, which are characteristic of the atom, man, the heavenly man or group, and of the logos or totality, comes a period of rhythm and of stabilization wherein the point of balance is achieved. The 2 degrees of motion are inertia and mobility, which, along with rhythm, makes up the 3 qualities of rotary motion. Inertia is not simply the lack of or the opposite of movement, but is rather the tendency to resist change, whether that change is from a state of motion or a state of rest. So let's take a closer look at these 3 gunas from a passage just a bit later in a treatise on cosmic fire. Could we get a reader, please? Actually, why don't we have 2 readers, the first one taking it down to through the first point on inertia, and then we'll have the second reader finish it, okay?
Hey, Nisa, do you want to read?
Sure.
Excuse. Hang on. Every rotating sphere of matter is characterized by the 3 qualities of inertia, mobility, and rhythm. 1, inertia. This characterizes every atom at the dawn of manifestation, at the beginning of a solar cycle or Mahamanvantara, or 100 years of Brahma. at the commencement of a chain, of a globe, or of any spheroidal form whatsoever without exception. This statement, therefore, includes the totality of manifesting forms within the solar system. Let us keep clearly in our minds that we are simply considering the three qualities of matter itself and are not considering consciousness. Inertia is the result of lack of activity and the relative quiescence of the fires of matter. These fires during obscuration or pralaya, though latent, are free from the stimulation that comes from the aggregation of atoms into form and the consequent interplay of the forms upon each other. Where form exists and the laws of repulsion and attraction are coming into force, making radiation therefore possible, then comes stimulation, emanative effect, and a gradual speeding up, which eventually, from within the atom itself, by its own rotary movement, produces the next quality.
Okay, so we get a further hint here that, Thomas or inertia follows pralaya, or that period of non-manifestation, where there is where all movement is latent and free from stimulation, right? And so it's natural that coming out of this, that you're going to carry that condition with you initially, in the early phases of every incarnation. Okay, next reader, please.
Yeah, Robert, you want to read?
2, mobility. The inherent fires of matter produce rotary movement. Eventually, this rotation results in radiation. Radiation of matter, the result of its dual heat, produces necessarily an effect upon other atoms in its environment. It matters not whether that environment is cosmic space, systemic space, or the periphery of the physical body of a man. And this interaction and interplay causes repulsion and attraction according to the polarity of the cosmic, systemic, or physical atom. Eventually, this produces coherence of form. Bodies or aggregates of atoms come into being or manifestation and persist for the length of their greater or lesser cycles until the third quality is brought into definite recognition. 3, rhythm, or the attainment of the point of perfect balance and of equilibrium. This point of perfect balance then produces certain specific effects which might be enumerated and pondered upon, even if to our finite minds they may seem paradoxical and contradictory.
Okay, and he's been telling us some of these specific effects in where we are in the text right now. That there's this response to quote unquote other vibrations, which I'm hypothesizing is issue from the soul, which then allow that equilibrium to turn into passage to that higher form, right? So any questions about this? I thought this was good because it gives us a real clear and more extended understanding of these three qualities. Okay, next up. By the force of balancing the pairs of opposites and thus producing equilibrium, pralaya is the inevitable sequence. So rhythm, sattva, or equilibrium, is achieved by an eons long task of balancing the many pairs of opposites found on the physical, astral, and mental planes, all of which are characterized by tamas or inertia and rajas or mobility. When this balance is finally achieved, a quote, adequate vibration is achieved and pralaya follows. So this whole thing can be cast in the sense of balancing the pairs of opposites in order to achieve the upper point of the equilateral triangle, which is an elevated form of existence, really. Because remember, we're still just talking about the physicality here, even when that physicality is transitions from dense physical to soul physicality, right? And next up, we have C, by the severing of the physical from the subtler body on the inner planes through the shattering of the web. So this is the third item in a list which answers the question, what causes that something we call death or pralaya? A was the cessation of desire. B, the cessation of cyclic rhythm, which leads to shattering of the web. That's the interplay between the pairs of opposites. And finally, we have here C, which is the actual severing of the physical from the subtler body. So let's continue. This has a threefold effect. First, the life that had animated the physical form, both dense and etheric, and which had its starting point in the permanent atom, and from thence pervaded the moving and the unmoving in God, the heavenly man, and the human being, as well as the atom of matter, is withdrawn entirely within the atom upon the plane of abstraction. Well, there's a mouthful there. There are two important ideas here. First, life had its starting point in the permanent atom, outer life, physical, emotional, mental life. This would be the outer expression of life whose essence is held in situ in the physical and astral permanent atoms, as well as the mental unit, before, quote, pervading the moving and the unmoving. The moving and unmoving is a phrase from the old commentary. Let's get a reader, please, for this.
Yeah, can you read?
The fire within the lesser fire findeth its progress much impelled when the circle of the moving and the unmoving of the lesser will within the greater will that moveth not in time findeth a twofold outlet. It then shineth with the glory of the twofold one and of his sixfold brother. Fohat rushes through space. He searcheth for his complement, the breath of the unmoving one, and the fire of the one who seeth the whole from the beginning rush to meet each other, and the unmoving becomes the sphere of activity.
Interesting. Okay, so this suggests that that unmoving is, in this context, quote, the greater wheel that moveth not in time. For human being, that greater wheel is the monad, whose will to be is expressed through the soul. The second point made here is the idea that life is withdrawn entirely within the atom upon the plane of abstraction, which plane is determined by the consciousness of the unit or jiva. This withdrawing process is literally illustrated by the point at the center of the circle. In this use of the symbol, the field that makes up the circle, which is characterized by the pairs of opposites, inertia and mobility, gradually collapses towards the central point through the influence of sattva until an equilibrium, here called rhythm, is achieved between the outer expression, which is what the circle represents, and the inner source, at which time the two become one. Or as DK says, the life is withdrawn entirely within the atom. Next, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Tia has something. Tia.
Yeah, Tia.
I'm sorry,
No,
but you have these great little, can you go back to the part that I just read? Because there was something particularly thought-provoking. Yes. So,
Here?
yeah, it says here, the greater will that moveth not in time, which you aptly refer to as the monad. And it says, findeth a twofold outlet, it shineth with the glory of the twofold one and his sixfold brother. So are we talking about the spiritual triad and the ego, or what are we referring to in this twofold outlet?
Well, I think it's soul and outer form.
Okay.
And of his sixfold brother has relation to Fohat. Fohat is sevenfold and it relates on to all the planes. So Fohat on its own plane would be like the Adi plane, and that truly is the place where that doesn't move in time, right? And then he demonstrates in different ways on the different planes as electricity in various forms, including cohesion, repulsion, attraction, etc. These are all aspects of Fohat.
I'm glad you clarified that, because if it had been the twofold had been referring to the spiritual triad and the ego, then the subsequent discussion of the withdrawal process would take on a totally different meaning.
Yeah, and you could, all you have to do is couch this in terms of the seventh initiation or the sixth, where that withdrawal is to the monad or even beyond, and it would have some relevance at that point, but that's not where he's pitching this at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, and Veronica, you want to read again?
This plane of abstraction is a different one from the entities involved. A. From the physical permanent atom, it is the atomic level. For man, it is the causal vehicle. C. For the heavenly man, it is the second plane of monadic life, his habitat. D. For the logos, it is the plane of Adi. All these mark the points of the disappearance of the unit into pralaya. We need here to remember that it is always pralaya when viewed from below. From the higher vision that sees the subtler continuously overshadowing the dense when not in objective manifestation, pralaya is simply subjectively, and it is not that which is not, but simply that which is esoteric.
Thank you, Anne Veronica.
Thank you.
So first, DK lists 4 different planes of abstraction shown here. Okay, and we're going to get into this. So for the physical permanent atom, you can see it here on your left, it is the atomic level, the life of the atom of substance illustrated left is abstracted from the lower 6 subplanes of the systemic physical plane, 3 dense physical and 3 etheric subplanes. And we see in this an analogy to the process of a solar logos, where in both cases, the lower 6 are drawn up into the atomic subplanes. That's because they're both physical, right? This is the physical systemic, and this is the cosmic physical, and the same laws prevail, where the 6th of manifestation is drawn up into the Adi subplane. Okay. For man, it is the causal vehicle shown here. It's interesting that the causal vehicle is here portrayed as an atom. In this withdrawal, man is abstracted from the 18 lower subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. For the heavenly man, it is the second plane, the monadic life, his habitat. The life of a planetary logos is abstracted from the 5 lower systemic planes. And finally, for the logos, it is the plane of Adi, the highest plane. The life of the logos is abstracted from the lower 6 systemic planes. All these planes of abstraction represent the habitat of the essential atom of the indwelling jiva, okay, from which incarnation is initiated and into which it is withdrawn. So, the one we're most familiar with is man. So that essential unit, that atom of essence, is initiated from and through the soul into physical incarnation, right? And that's that atom, that essence, varies at 4 different levels depending on what level of consciousness you're talking about. Okay. Next up, all these mark the points for the disappearance of the unit into pralaya. We need here to remember that it is always pralaya when viewed from below, from the higher vision that sees the settler continuously overshadowing the dense when not in objective manifestation. Pralaya is simply subjectivity and is not that which is not, but simply that which is esoteric. This definition of pralaya points to why DK says that there is no death, only a passage into a subjective state. As said earlier, the life is withdrawn within the atom upon the plane of abstraction. And those atoms are described here, right? Okay, next up, can we get a reader?
Fred, would you like to read again?
Are you there, Fred? Let's go on.
Okay, and Magda has posted in here this wheel is Dendaras, and I think it's in reference to something you were just talking about.
Oh, I see that. Yeah. Oh, that's the astrological chart at the top of the Temple of Dendera. That's the original. It's in the Louvre. And then they have a reproduction in the Temple at Dendera.
And Fred's here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Fred.
waiting.
Could you read, please?
Yeah, my phone is blocking the top of the.
Right. Okay. Maybe you shouldn't read then. I think it's just easier just to listen in. Let's get another reader.
Okay.
Thanks, Fred.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Heike, can you read again?
Second, the etheric double of a man, a planetary logos and a solar logos being shattered becomes non-polarized as regards its indweller and permits therefore of escape. It is, to word it otherwise, no longer a source of attraction nor a focal magnetic point. It becomes non-magnetic, and the great law of attraction ceases to control it. Hence, integration is the ensuing condition of the form. The ego ceases to be attracted by its form on the physical plane, and proceeding to inbreathe, withdraws its life from out of the sheath. The cycle draws to a close, the experiment has been made, the objective, a relative one from life to life and from incarnation to incarnation, has been achieved, and there remains nothing more to desire. The ego or the thinking entity loses interest, therefore, in the form and turns his attention inward. His polarization changes, and the physical is eventually dropped.
Thank you. Okay, so first up, DK's second point concerning the severing of the physical body from the subtler body. The etheric double of a man, a planetary logos, and a solar logos, being shattered, becomes non-polarized as regards its indweller, and permits, therefore, of escape. It is, to word it otherwise, no longer a source of attraction, nor a focal magnetic point. So let's take a look at MDR's thoughts. We haven't heard from him today on this passage. Could we get a reader? This here at the left is just the quote that we just read. So could we get a reader for the dark part?
Janet, can you read again?
Sure. This is an important statement in relation to bioelectricity, polarization, and its inevitable interpolar magnetism binds and prevents escape. It seems that the shattering of the etheric double is the cause of its becoming non-polarized. It become then neutral to its indweller, neither active nor repulsive. Sattva is neutral and non-polarized. In the periodic table, inert gases are examples of non-polarized, hence sattvic elements. Perhaps in the content of the periodic table, they exist in a state analogous to
Hermaphroditism.
Hermaphroditism.
There you go.
Their attractive encounters would occur within themselves. Thank you so much. In the human evolution, the sattvic stage is achieved at the fourth initiation, when the personality vehicles are composed entirely of atomic matter. There is therefore no desire to return to incarnation, and nor need to do so, except under the impediments of the will to save. In this very practical instance, sattva represents equilibrium, harmony, and therefore release from incarnation through non-desire. Mars, the planet which through desire and attachment initiates return, is in detriment in Libra, one of the most sattvic of signs during the later stages of evolution. If we want to escape, we must end desire and thus be non-polarized. We are to achieve a divine neutrality, which is pure, and through releasing love, overcomes the expression of selfless desire.
Selfish desire.
Oh, selfish desire, sorry.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, some good points here. You know, you don't have to think of desire only in terms of the desire to be alive or in incarnation. We can think of many instances in our lives where our desire fades for something or someone, and we achieve this stage of non-polarization. You know, where that magnetic polarity is broken, and then you move into the next phase. Usually, you know, the desire shifts to another desire, but at some point, desire itself is overcome. And, you know, MDR makes a good point that that through the release of love, one can overcome selfish desire. Okay. Next, it becomes non-magnetic, and the great law of attraction ceases to control it. Hence, disintegration is the ensuing condition of the form. The ego ceases to be attracted by its form on the physical plane, and proceeding to inbreathe, withdraws its life from out of the sheath. The breaking of polarity allows for disintegration to ensue, followed by egoic in-breath. We have to ever keep in mind the dual teaching going on here. Obviously, this info references an individual's passage out of a single incarnation. But ultimately, more importantly, it pertains to the final liberation at the fourth initiation, where through a final achievement of the sattvic or rhythmic state of consciousness, there is a cessation of the will to live in incarnated human form altogether. Next, the cycle draws to a close. The experiment has been made. The objective, a relative one from life to life and from incarnation to incarnation, has been achieved, and there remains nothing more to desire. The ego, or the thinking entity, loses interest, therefore, in the form, and turns his attention inward. This statement relates to a single passing out of incarnation again, but it also characterizes the final overcoming of the desire to incarnate. The words, the ego or the thinking entity loses interest, suggests, of course, the loss of desire. The key thought here is the objective has been achieved, and there remains nothing more to desire. We've covered this idea now. He's really hammering this home. I saw Robert's hand go up. Yes, Robert.
Yeah, as we're looking at this material, the thought came to me that as above, so below, there must be some analogous event like cremation for each of these, beings we're talked about in their forms. Just as the physical body decay emphasizes that's the way of disposal of the physical and the etheric. In the same way, that must be true for the planet and the solar system too. And it makes me wonder, well, who is the cremating entity of that?
Well, it's not always true, because we have the moon as the dead corpse of our previous Earth in the previous round, right? So, actually,
I see that. And the moon is sometimes said to be a real cause of problems to the Earth too.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
perhaps it's that lack of cremation. Anyway, again, it's a law of analogy thing, but I never really thought about it before. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And this short sentence at the end is polarization changes and the physical is eventually dropped. This is an interesting statement. What is a change of polarization with respect to the life of the ego? He's not just saying it becomes non-polarized, he's saying that it changes. It has depolarized to the personality aspect and repolarized to what? The monad seems like the most obvious candidate. I see Yvonne's hand. Yes, Yvonne?
Well, you just answered my question. He's attracted to the next above him, and what was attracted, and he becomes negative. He was positive to the desires, and now he becomes negative to the triad or whatever else is about. You said monad above him.
Right, which is just, the triad's a vehicle of the monad. So it makes sense, that it would go into a period of pralaya where it then fed on its own higher source before issuing forth another incarnation, Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Kira, can you read?
The planetary logos, likewise, in his greater cycle, the synthesis or the aggregate of the tiny cycles of the cells of his body, pursues the same course. He ceases to be attracted downward or outward and turns his gaze within. He gathers inward the aggregate of the smaller lives within his body, the planet, and severs connection. Outer attraction ceases, and all gravitates towards the center instead of scattering to the periphery of his body. In the system, The same process is followed by the solar logos. From his high place of abstraction, he ceases to be attracted by his body of manifestation. He withdraws his interest, and the two pairs of opposites, the spirit and the matter of the vehicle, disassociate. With this disassociation, the solar system, that sun of necessity or of desire, ceases to be and passes out of objective existence.
Thank you. Okay, first, the planetary logos, likewise in his greater cycle, the synthesis or the aggregate of the teeny cycles of the cells of his body, pursues the same course. He ceases to be attracted downward or outward and turns his gaze within. So the changes in a planetary logi's consciousness seem to result from an interaction between the, quote, aggregate of tiny human and Davic life cycles and the initiatory life of the logos. We might ask, which is causal? Do we grow in consciousness through the strides made by the planetary logos? Or does the logos evolve through the collective efforts of the, quote, cells in his body, which are the Davic and human units of consciousness? Next, he gathers inward the aggregate of the smaller lives within his body, the planet, and severs connection. Outer attraction ceases and all gravitates towards the center instead of scattering to the periphery of his body. So in addition to our individual life cycles, humanity collectively enters into pralaya through the death of the planetary logos at the end of his cycle of manifestation. This happens at the end of the last root race of a globe. A more profound pralaya occurs after the last globe of a round, and a final complete pralaya dissociation, happens after the last chain of the entire planetary scheme withdraws from all life in outer manifestation. Of course, this is going to be directly connected with the end of the life of the solar system as well, because it is just as the life of a planetary logos is made up of the Davic and human units of consciousness. The solar logos is also made up of the planetary lives, and so its completion would signal the completion of the lives of the planetary logi would signal the completion of the solar logoic cycle. And that is going to do it for today. That's all we have time for.